Hello everybody and thank you for joining me. This is Sierra from Sierra T Designs and today I have these two Love mini slimline cards to share with you. So let's jump right in. As always, I do like to cut down my cardstock. So I'm creating my bases here and they will be 6 inches by 6 inches and then I score at the 3-inch mark, making the base 3 inches by 6 inches. This is my preferred slimline size. There's no like specific mini slimline size as far as I understand. It's just, you know, it's kind of funny. There's no real set size for this. I think you can make it slightly bigger than this or slightly smaller, whatever you like to do. I just find the 6-inch card size one of the easiest ones to trim out, so that's kind of my preference. And then I did score on both sides because this is a heavyweight cardstock, and I find that if I score on both sides, I'm a lot less likely to crack the cardstock when I actually fold it. Because it's so dry here right now, my cardstock has been cracking a bit more than I've ever had it done. So I think that I attribute it to the weather here. But so if I score it on both sides, I have less chance of that happening. And then I did also bring in some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and this is going to be the panel I'm actually going to work on. And I also have the Deckled edge trimmer here. So I am cutting this down to be about 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base. And I leave it a bit bigger than that so I can kind of deckle my edge. And the cool thing about the Deckled edge trimmer is that it's less deckled at the top and more deckled at the bottom. So it gives you a variation of how much deckle you actually want on your panel, which I think is pretty neat. And of course, there are dyes and other things you can use to do that. This is just what I own, so this is what I use. And then to create the hearts that we're going to make, I brought in one's a spray stain, one's an oxide, and one is a spray stain, like a mica spray stain that Tim Holtz brought out. I want to say this one came out in the Halloween set, I believe. It's winter. Oh no, it might have been the Christmas. It's Winterberry. I think it was actually the Christmas set. I don't think you can buy these anymore. If I can link to it, I will for sure if anybody's interested. But for the Distress Spray Stain, I used Picked Raspberry, and then for the Oxide, I used Spun Sugar. And this is Distress Watercolor cardstock, so I was able to put a lot of water on the background, which I did with my Distress Sprayer, just to get some movement. I mean, these colors aren't going to do anything weird together anyway. They're just shades of pink, so they're not going to create issues with like browns or anything like that. That's not a concern. But to get some movement and some variation in the colors of the backgrounds, I did spray them with water first. And then that also gives you that oxidizing from the Distress Oxide that just kind of creates a really interesting different tonal color. So I really enjoy both. I've been playing with both. I've just been recently picking up the Distress Spray Stains. So I am slowly collecting new inks, but yeah, and then I cut out the stars. So I have the hearts. I have the nested hearts by Hero Arts here, and I picked out the 5 smallest ones, and I just adhered them down to my base, or my card panel there, with some mint tape. Now you want to be really careful with the mint tape. It can tear the cardstock if you're not careful. And you did see me bring in my Ranger heat tool. I tried to dry this pretty well before it went through. I get impatient when I craft. I really should walk away and do something else and let it dry, but I'm bad for just wanting to make things. So I ran it through, and if it's a little bit wet, the mint tape will tear. So just be aware of that and be careful. And then I brought in, this is the Tumbling Hearts stencil by Simon Says Stamp, and I brought in some Distress Oxide ink in Spun Sugar again, just to create a little bit more interest in the background. This card is a little, I wouldn't say simple. I would just say it doesn't have, well, see, I wouldn't say simple. I'm not totally sure, honestly, what I would tell you. It's not a terribly simple card. There's a fair amount going on, but it's a bit more simple than I tend to go. So for me, it's a little bit more of a simple card, because I didn't bring in, tons of layers and tons of glitters and tons of, like, I kind of tried to limit myself a bit. Like, I specifically went brown, pink, and white. That's all we're going to use here. Oh, sorry, I bring in gold. I'm lying to you. I bring in gold. We're going to use brown, pink, white, and gold, because you guys know I love pink and gold together if you've been on my channel for a minute. And I did bring in my reverse tweezers and some Nuvo Deluxe glue, and I'm just adhering the smaller hearts down on the panel. I had laid them out how I wanted them because I knew that I was going to bring my sentiment on top of those hearts. So I'm going to add some dimension to the bigger heart here in a minute. So I use my reverse tweezers just because it's easier with me with my longer fingernails to pick them up. I mean, you can use whatever you want to use. That's just easier for me. So I did bring in 5 hearts because I also like uneven numbers. I think they look better. And I think that really suited the mini slimline size. And then I brought in the Alphanumeric stretch alphabet dies from Tim Holtz, and I'm using love, the word love. So I cut it out in gold cardstock. I'm going to use the satin, I think it's satin matte gold from Simon Says Stamp. Again, everything I use is always linked and listed down below if you're ever curious. And ask me questions if you're ever curious as well. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And I'm going to cut it out twice because we have 2 cards here. And I did ponder bringing in some gold hearts to add, but I end up changing my mind and doing something a little bit different. And if you saw when I ran my hearts through my Gemini, I did put a cardstock, just a piece in there to kind of differentiate it from the matte and the plastic. That was just to keep the ink from transferring. I have had the ink transfer. Generally, I think it's dry, and I run it through and it's not as dry as I think it is. So that was just to keep all the moisture off of the cutting pad so that I don't transfer it to something else. And I did do love 2 more times out of, well, 4 more times technically, 2 per card. And I cut it out of the same heavyweight cardstock I used for the base. I cut it out 2 more times, and then I'm just going to layer it up so that the love stands out against the background. Again, this is just an extra step. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could cut it out in foam or do little foam strips or anything like that. I just find this easier, and I have scraps of cardstock, especially when I make these mini slimline cards, because it's kind of, I have to cut an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet down to a 6.5 sheet. And sadly, it won't make 2, right? Because it's not 12 inches, it's 11 inches. So I have extra cardstock left. So usually I like to use it for stuff like this, like layering up panels, so or words, whichever is what I happen to be doing. So I did just layer them up. I'm using the Barely Art glue because it has that super fine tip. You don't need to use 2 liquid glues. I just do because I have them both. Whatever you want to use works perfectly fine. You could put it through like a Xyron sticker maker or anything like that. Whatever works for you. I just have a preference to liquid glue. And then I brought in my FineTec Pearlescent watercolor palette, and I'm just mixing up some of the gold paint. I want to bring in some more gold, so I chose to do it this way instead of bringing in more hearts. I kind of like the 5 hearts and then the tumbling ones in the background that are really subtle, so I didn't want to bring in more hearts. So I decided I really wanted to edge my panel with some of this gold watercolor. And I, excuse me, I am also going to splash some onto the background after I have edged it and have it down on my mat. Now, I should have used my Splat Box for this, and you know, I do this every time. I bring out my Splat Box and I use it to create something, and then I set it aside and I forget about it, and then I want to do splashes, and then I splash it everywhere. I am so bad for this. I literally had like this gold paint everywhere. So you're going to see when I flip over the bases and go to adhere them to the panels onto the bases, you're gonna see all the gold paint that I got all over the background of this panel, but it's okay because it's the background, so it doesn't matter. So it's all good. And then I'm gonna bring in that same Barely Art glue, and I'm gonna use it to adhere my letters on top. Now be aware that of course the Distress watercolor cardstock is a thick cardstock. So my letters have gaps between where they're touching the hearts and where they're touching the background. So, I mean, I don't mind this. I mean, you could then bring in other cardstock and level them up so that they're flush. That's way too much work for me, in my opinion. Just because I'm too lazy to be doing that. So they're going to shift around here. You can see that like I'm struggling to get them to stick a little bit. They will stick because I'm more stubborn than they are, but they do shift around. But I just bring in my Misty, which is what I do when anything is being a pain and doesn't want to adhere properly. I just bring in my Misty because it's sitting on my desk and I know that it's flat. And you can see that I added some 3M foam tape to the back of that heart so that it propped it up, because it is kind of the main focal. That and the word love are really what you're trying to kind of focus on, is at least what I was going for. So I did pop them up a little bit. The 3M foam tape's not super thick, so it gives it a little bit of dimension. And then this is where you're going to see the mess of the back. But again, it doesn't matter. It's the back. See there, I've like got gold ink everywhere, but that's okay. I mean, it wipes up. It's watercolor, so it doesn't stain anything or stay on anything. So that's perfect. So I did bring my Nuvo Deluxe glue back in, and I am going to adhere my panels down to my white bases. Now you could, of course, do something inside. You could add a sub-sentiment. I chose to just use the word love because this can work for so many things. I mean, it can be, you know, romantic love, like I could give it to my husband, or I could give it to my mom, familial love, or just love of a friend. There are so many forms of love that I feel like love just works. So I chose to not add a sub-sentiment, to not limit the card more than what I've already done here. So love by itself, but you could absolutely add something. And then I brought in my Arctic pearls by Studio Katia, and I chose to go with white pearls just to tie in a little bit more white from the base. You have that border of white, but that's pretty much the only white in the design really, so I just wanted to add a little bit more white on the front, so I brought in white pearls. But again, you could have done gold, you could have done pink, you could, there are other options here. I chose to go with the white ones. So yeah, that is the card I have for you guys. I'm going to hold it up so you can see all that shine and shimmer, and look how beautiful these are. I think they turned out really cute. I love mini slimline cards. They're one of my favorite sizes. I would love to know what you guys think of these cards, and if you create mini slimlines or you don't prefer them, and what you'd like to do for your mini slimline size. I'm always a little interested in that because it seems to be a bit of there's different sizes. So that is the card I have for you guys today. I hope that you will consider subscribing if you haven't already. I do new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I will see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye for now.